UFC Vegas 23, aka UFC on ABC2, or just simply put, UFC Fight Night. We have Kevin Holland versus Marvin Vettori. UFC is back after a 1 week layoff. Boxing MMA Picks is back after a 1 week layoff as well. Of course, he goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And Boxing MMA Picks, we are here to give you our UFC breakdown, our UFC analysis. We're here to let you know which fights to avoid, which fights are possibly worth the value. We'll let you know which underdogs we're feeling as well. And hey, maybe we'll even couple together a few favorite picks for you. Shout out to Kevin Holland for stepping up on short notice in this fight against Marvin Vettori as the main event. Very busy card on this one, 15 fights, so definitely back with a lot of action, which means we have a lot of action to review. We have 9 fights on the prelim, so of course we're going to speak and break down the prelim fights first. Make sure you check out our main card video following this prelim video. But you know what? Let's get right into it. We got a lot of work to do today. Let's talk about fight number 1. We have Impa Kasanganay versus Sasha Palatnikov. I'm going to start on this one, and I will say my choice here is going to be Impa. I mean, we see him here as a pretty big favorite at minus 300. When I'm looking at Impa Kasanganay here, still a little green in my opinion. I think he had a good debut versus Maki Pitolo. I mean, Maki is always game, so that's a pretty solid win for a debut. And then, of course, he suffered that spin kick KO to Joaquin Buckley. In the Pitolo fight, I mean, he showed me a few things, right? He showed me decent control in the stand-up. Pitolo probably had a bit of a striking speed advantage, at least early on in that fight. But he was able to hurt Pitolo towards the end of that one, especially towards the end of the first, I should say, with some power punch combinations, which I really like to see from him. And then, he made some, movement in the second round, right? He showed that he can be technically sharp, at least as his career continues to develop. I will say, for the 170-pound division, still a little slow in my eyes. So I can see fighters potentially having a speed advantage against him. And it's going to be really interesting to see as he potentially moves up the charts. When I'm looking at Sasha Palatnikov, on the other hand, I mean, he's the longer striker. He's the rangier striker. It's going to be interesting because he is taller by a couple of inches, but he will be at a reach disadvantage. So it's going to be interesting to see here. He uses his kicks. He'll move decently around the ring, kind of fights more from the outside. Going to be interesting to see how that range dynamic plays out in this fight. If you want to watch the Sasha Palatnikov versus Louis Koski fight, he didn't really have much of an answer for that blitzing style, right? Like I mentioned, he moves around the cage a lot, but what Koski was able to do, again, at least early on in the fight, because we learned that Koski doesn't have the best cardio, was that he was able to cut the ring off. He was able to continue coming forward. He was able to sort of put the pressure on Sasha, and Sasha wasn't taking it too well. I'll be honest with you, right? What's going to be the most interesting here, well, before I say that, Sasha, I mean, he showed good heart in that fight. I mean, he survived the onslaught in that first round, took that on, so I do have to salute that. This fight is at welterweight, and that's what's really going to be interesting for me because Impa is a middleweight in some ways, right? At least based on how his frame looks, and he has competed at middleweight in the past. I think Impa might even have the striking advantage here. We don't know how much he's improved fight over fight. And I haven't seen much striking defense from Sasha Palatnikov, so that's going to be interesting here as well. And with Palatnikov, I haven't really seen other factors like a takedown or like a change of pace. So in a lot of ways, I think this one stays on the feet, and I think Impa gets the job done. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I like Impa in this fight. I think what it comes down to is they're both well-rounded fighters. Impa got that bad knockout versus Buckley in his last fight, but before the knockout, he was kind of turning the fight in his favor, but then he got kicked, right? So again, this is a tough fight to come back from a bad knockout like that. I believe that Impa is going to use a wrestling attack in this fight against Sasha. I think he has the far better grappling in this fight. So I think that's what's going to come down to is Impa is going to be the stronger guy. He's going to implement a wrestling approach, holding him against the cage. We know he trains out of Sanford MMA, so iron sharpens iron over there, right? So he has a lot of welterweights to work with. Gilbert Burns, Justin Jackson, a lot of guys. He has a lot of guys. Vicente Luque. So he has a lot of guys in his weight class or around his weight class that he can get good sparring sessions out of. So I think this is an easy win here for Impa. So I like Impa to win this fight, likely by decision.
I like that as well, that decision pick especially. Let's move on to fight number 2. We have Da Un Jung versus William Knight. Now, a big height and reach advantage in favor of Da Un Jung is probably going to be the first thing that you'll notice about this fight. I mean, you got, he's 6 inches in height. You have 5.5 inches in reach. Second thing you'll notice is the odds. Da Un Jung is at -140. William Knight is at +120. Da Un Jung, correct me if I'm wrong, is a bigger favorite versus Knight than Alonzo Menafield was in their fight that was supposed to happen. So that's interesting. That's interesting to see how Vegas respects Da Un Jung on this one. When I'm looking at Da Un Jung, I mean, we saw him have that split decision draw, if I'm not mistaken, versus Sam Alvey at UFC 254. Honestly, a bit of a disappointment there, in my opinion. In terms of his skill, I do like what I see from him, right? He has pretty patient stand-up, pretty good hands, more of a boxer in there than anything else. I feel with that boxing style comes a lot of boxing capabilities, right? He cuts the ring off well. He has good fakes, good feints, good in and out movements as well. So pretty decent stand-up, especially with the hands. When we look at William Knight, of course, we've spoken about him a few times at this point over the past couple of weeks for fights that were supposed to happen. He considers himself to be a brawler. We know at some point he's going to try to get you against the cage, right? Implement some kind of takedown attempt or make it dirty against the cage type of style. As we see, I mean, he averages almost 4 takedowns per fight. So that's definitely a part of his repertoire. Interesting to note here that Da Un Jung has never been knocked out. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we know, obviously, as we move up in weight class, this one being at light heavyweight, and when we know, William Knight, especially with that stocky frame that he has, of his 9 wins, 8 of them are by knockout, right? So it's going to be interesting to see, is that a factor? Is his power a factor? Has Da Un Jung ever been hit with something like the power that William Knight has? Or will his chin sort of hold up the way it has throughout his entire career in 16 fights thus far? It's also going to be interesting to see whether or not William Knight can take him down, right? I mean, strength is going to be an interesting dynamic in this one. William Knight would physically appear to be the stronger fighter, but we're going to have to figure that out, right? Also in this fight, I do think that as it stays on the feet, I do see Jung being technically more sound. I see him being, using that height advantage, using that reach advantage. I really see that playing a factor in terms of William Knight's ability to even get in. And, William Knight has shown his ability to use his strength and land takedowns even late in fights. So again, even though, Da Un Jung has 83% takedown defense, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not he can keep that up for 3 rounds, right? That said, I do think that this fight primarily stays on the feet. Tough fight, split decision type of fight, in my opinion. But I'm going to go with Da Un Jung on this one.
Yeah, for me, this is a really, really hard fight. I don't want nothing to do with it as far as the betting goes. Because on one side, you got to look at this fight can go 2 ways. Will William Knight be able to grapple? Will he be able to hold him against the cage, utilize his strength, and just get him on the ground, get some ground and pound going, pretty much grapple? Or will Jung be able to keep this on the feet, keep that distance, get that pace that he wants, and win a striking match, right? So it's a tough fight. Jung has a nice 1-2, has a nice jab. He likes to paw out there. William Knight is pretty awkward with his stand-up. Honestly, this is 50-50 because we don't know if William Knight's going to be able to get this to the ground. If he does, he likely is going to win this fight by gassing Jung out on the ground with his smothering top control, because he's really strong if he can get on top. And but again, if this stays on the feet, Da Un Jung is solid there. So again, this is hard for me. This is 50-50. Again, I'm not betting this fight, but I'm gonna echo that pick. I'm gonna go with Jung. I know he trains out of the Korean top team. I know they got some fighters out there in ONE FC. So I know that he has some good sparring going on. William Knight's a bit awkward here. I don't like the way he keeps his hands down. So yeah, 50-50 fight. I'm gonna go with Jung, hoping that he can keep us on the feet and utilize that jab, utilize that straight. So let's go. Daeong Jung is my pick.
Fight number 3 in that case, we have Luis Saldaña versus Jordan Griffin. Why don't you start this one off?
Yeah, to me, this is another fight that's really hard for me because I look at Luis Saldaña. He has that Sugar O'Malley. He has that O'Malley stand-up type of striking. Yeah, he's very quick. He has very good striking. And he's fighting Jordan Griffin, who has fought in the UFC already. Saldaña's coming off the Contender Series. Saldaña definitely has a striking advantage, but I know Jordan has the grappling advantage. Like, Jordan should be able to get this to the mat. Now, Jordan doesn't have the best cardio. I want to go Saldaña. I love his style. I think that he could be something in the UFC, but he already has 6 losses. I've seen him get grounded in matches. Again, he could win this fight, keep us on the feet, which he likely does. But I'm going to go with the veteran. I'm going to go with Jordan Griffin. I think everyone now is fighting for their job, because if you lose a couple fights, that's all it takes, right? So I think Jordan Griffin should implement a grappling heavy attack here. Saldaña looks like he doesn't have the best takedown defense. But again, I won't be surprised. Saldaña, again, is new to the UFC off the Contender Series. His striking is really high level that if this stays on the feet, he could finish this guy, Jordan Griffin. I'm just banking on the fact that Saldaña is a newcomer coming off the Contender Series. I need to see more from this guy before I can go out there and just pick him against a vet in the UFC. Even though Jordan hasn't shown me a lot, he has shown me that he can grapple a bit. And I think that's Saldaña's weakness. So I'm gonna go with the underdog? I'm gonna go with the underdog here, I think. Jordan Griffin in a fight that I likely won't put a bet on because I believe Saldaña is live because he has a good path. But I think Jordan has a wide path as well. So I'm just gonna flip a coin, go with Jordan Griffin on this one.
Yeah, I like a few things that you mentioned there. First of all, the Jordan Griffin pick, I think, is a good one. I think he could be somebody that definitely busts a few parlays. So really be careful with this fight. Just in general, you might want to avoid any parlay play or parlay action with this one. Another thing I like that you mentioned is Luis Saldaña kind of having that Sugar Sean O'Malley type of stand-up. And what I noticed with Jordan Griffin is, Jordan Griffin loses to those types of fighters, right? He loses to those fighters that have, a lot of skill. He's actually 1-3 in the UFC. So as much as he's a veteran, he's really looking at, a 20% win ratio in his last 5 if he doesn't get this one done. So to your point, definitely fighting for his job. That we've seen that be an X factor in the UFC very recently, almost a week-over-week basis. So that's an important X factor to consider in this one. Jordan Griffin, trying to save his job. What's interesting, again, I mentioned that, Jordan Griffin loses to these more skillful type of strikers, Dan Ige, Yusuf Zalal. I think Luis Saldaña kind of belongs in that conversation as well. Maybe not comparing him exactly to them, but comparing the striking advantage that I think Luis Saldaña will have in that fight. That said, to your point, Jordan Griffin is tough, right? He shows toughness. He's not afraid to go for it. He's not afraid to engage. He's not afraid to shoot for a takedown. He's not afraid to continue to try to shoot for it, but that will wear on his cardio tank. We saw versus somebody who moves around pretty decently. If you watch his fight versus Yusuf Zalal, he was still able to grab a hold of Zalal. He was still able to take him down. He was still able to use that aggression to shoot for takedowns, to make the fight ugly, to have a lot of clinch situations. Zalal maybe didn't show the best IQ in that fight because he tried to go to the ground as much as Jordan Griffin did. But nonetheless, Jordan Griffin was able to engage in that way. So who's to say he can't catch Luis Saldaña, right? I think Vegas is respecting that by giving him only a plus 120 rather than being something like a plus 160, maybe plus 180 as well. But to that point, I'm mentioning all these things about Jordan Griffin. I am concerned about his cardio tank, and I am concerned about just his ability to win at this level. He's 1-3 in the UFC. Yes, he's taking on a newcomer, but this is a newcomer who's pretty crisp in his striking. I'm gonna go with the crisper striker here. Saldaña is undefeated since 2018. He's had some questionable losses. Alex Wiggs Jr. was 3-2 at the time. Mike Santiago was 17-9 at the time. Just look at the records of the peoples that he's faced. So this could be a point where maybe Saldaña's not ready for this level. But you know what? I do like him in this fight. I think he has that skillful style that gives Jordan Griffin problems. If he was a bit more battle tested, I'd feel really good about this fight. But I am going to sort of trust the distinction in striking that I feel that I saw when breaking these two fighters down, in addition to sort of the questionable cardio that Jordan Griffin always presents. So tough one. Again, be really careful with this fight. But I'm also going to flip a coin, but my coin is going to land on Luis Saldaña. So let's move on to fight number 4. In that case, we have Hunter Azure versus Jack Shore. Why don't you take this one away as well?
All right. When you look at Hunter Azure, he's well-rounded. He has a wrestling background. He can keep the fight on the feet. He has heavy hands. He can knock you out. This guy is really powerful. Fighting Jack Shore, who stand-up isn't the greatest. But Jack Shore is one of those guys that are just on another level when it comes to grappling. When I see him grapple these fighters, he just seems to be ahead of them when it comes to grappling. Now in this fight, I like Jack Shore to win this fight, but I'm a bit nervous because I find that Hunter Azure is like pretty strong. Like he looks really strong, and he is really strong, and he's hard to get down. Jack Shore is not going to be the physically stronger fighter in this fight. I think Hunter is going to be a much stronger fighter actually than Jack Shore. And the reason I'm going with Jack Shore, I just think that when it comes to the grappling, and I think that's where this fight's going to be, because Jack Shore is relentless in getting the fight where he's good at. I think he just needs 1 or 2 takedowns, and I think he can cause some damage. And I think if he gets him down at least once, that round's over. He's going to hold him there the whole fight. You can get your back. He can choke you out. He has really good submissions, a really, really good top game. I believe Hunter Azure is really live, though. If this stays standing, if Hunter stops the takedowns and he's able to implement really good takedown defense throughout the fight, his stand-up is to me far, far better than Jack Shore. But I just think Jack Shore is relentless. To me, he seems a bit ahead of these guys in the grappling area. I think he will get this fight to the ground, whether it's a trip. And one thing I noticed with Jack is that when he goes for takedowns, he shoots in really, really low on his opponent's legs. And that's going to help him a lot here when he's fighting a stronger guy. When you get in low on those guys, they can't really use that strength to get out of it. So I like Jack to get this to the mat here. He has really good cardio as well with the grapple. He can grapple and he can keep that pace up. So I'm going to go Jack Shore to win this fight. He might stop him. I'm really high on Jack Shore. So even though there's a lot of signs that tell me Hunter can pull this off because he has wrestling to keep it on the feet and he's the better striker, I'm just really high on Jack Shore, and I just think that he's going to overcome this big challenge here. So Jack Shore is my pick.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this because I am echoing a lot of the statements that you made. I think the UFC wants Jack Shore to win. 13-0, pretty young prospect. I think he's 25 years old, 26 years old. And, they gave him a winnable fight, right? It's not to say Hunter Azure is an easy opponent. To your point, the stand-up is better. And wrestling is his background, or wrestling is actually what he's sort of more so known for rather than his striking. You watch some of his fights, especially his last fight versus Cole Smith. Good wrestling technique. He showed that. He went to the wrestling first and didn't sort of fall in love with the striking. And to your point of the fact that he's stronger, the fact that he has good takedown defense, 76% takedown defense presented as well. So, on paper, Hunter Azure presents some of the skill set and some of the tools to be able to present a challenge for Jack Shore. But, like I said, I think Jack Shore gets it done here. I think his relentless style of wrestling is something that's really, going to be a factor in this fight. And listen, 7 of his 13 wins are by rear naked choke. right? Including both of his UFC wins. So that could be something to look out for as well. And I know you mentioned the stand-up not being the best, but it is, it's more than serviceable, right? I think it's pretty decent overall. Jab is pretty good. He's given fighters like Aaron Phillips a hard time on the feet. I don't know how much that's saying, but nonetheless, he's had fights where he's been in the advantage on the feet. So, pretty serviceable in the stand-up, to maybe not make Hunter completely dominate there. And then again, the relentless ground game is what we're essentially looking for from him. So I'm going to go with Jack Shore as well, minus 150, potentially some good value there. Although again, Hunter Azure to some degree is live. Let's move on in that case to fight number 5. We have Yorgan de Castro versus Jarjis Danho. Man, I'm staying away from this one. Heavyweight beware, of course. Two guys that look really out of shape in general when they fight. So I can't really trust either of them. What's interesting about Jarjis Danho is that he hasn't fought since September 2016. He's making a comeback at 37 years old after 5 years. It's a little weird to me. What's the reason for it? I hadn't particularly heard anything as to why he's coming back. He is winless in the UFC. I mean, it's only 2 fights, albeit, but 1 loss, 1 draw in the UFC. So, I mean, he still have yet to win at this level. Stand-up is a little bit awkward. I mean, he bounces around a lot in there, kind of Machida style. I asked myself if that's the smartest thing to do from a cardio perspective. He's going to look for takedown. He's going to look for clinch situations. I'm not saying he's going to land them. I mean, we see his takedowns at less than 1 per fight with only a 20% accuracy. And again, I mean, that cardio tank runs out pretty quickly, as is the case with many heavyweights. As for Yorgan de Castro, I mean, we saw him come off a pretty disappointing loss to Carlos Felipe. We know his striking is pretty good. I actually like his striking, right? A lot of feints, good uses of kicks, calf kick, body kicks, has some pretty sharp combos, especially early in the fight. And that's actually where this fight could be decided, because I think Yorgan de Castro might get the knockout here. But I mean, again, too many variables in this fight. The fact that they're heavyweights, the fact that neither of them have cardio, the fact that Jarjis Danho is back after 5 years, it's hard to gauge where a fighter is after that long. Is he coming back just for a check? Is he coming back because he's this new man with a whole new skill set? We don't know. I mean, too many question marks at that point. From what I've seen with his 2016 footage compared to Yorgan de Castro now, I do think de Castro should have the big advantage on the feet, a big technique advantage, probably even the power advantage as well. Again, I see a round 1 knockout potential here. I think sort of either way you put it, I'm going with Yorgan de Castro on this. But I will say the odds are too many variables to go with a almost minus 300 on this. So either way, I'm going to pick Yorgan de Castro, but I am going to say be careful with this fight just due to the unknowns.
Yeah, this is my pick, Yorgan de Castro. This guy is going to give this Danho guy a steady diet of leg kicks and hooks. And Danho is going to try to rush him against the cage and hold him against the cage. He may try a takedown or 2. If he does land a takedown, okay, but he doesn't have the technique really to finish other than ground and pound, right? So, and one thing as well, if Danho doesn't finish him, he's going to gas. He's going to gas 100%. He's 37 years old. De Castro's 33. I'm going to go Yorgan de Castro here. I'm pretty confident he wins this fight. He's on a 2-fight losing streak against higher competition, Carlos Felipe and Greg Hardy. So he's fighting for his job, literally. So he's fighting for his job, and he's the younger guy, the better striker. Yeah, he should win this fight.
Agreed. I do agree on that. I mean, when it's all said and done, I definitely agree on that. Again, just too many variables, and in a heavyweight division, I just can't trust that myself. Let's move on to fight number 6. In that case, we have John Makdessi versus Ignacio Bahamondes. First thing that you're going to notice in this fight, again, big size advantage for Bahamondes, right? He's not only is he 7 inches taller, but he also has a 7-inch reach advantage, right? He's also 12 years younger, and his last 2 fights were at 170 pounds as a welterweight, whereas this fight is taking place at 155 pounds as a lightweight. As a welterweight, in those last 2 fights, he went 2-0, right? So there's a lot to immediately like about Bahamondes here. He has good kickboxing, almost that sort of Thai kickboxing style. Good snap on his punches, good snap on his kicks. Small UFC sample size, but lands at a pretty impressive rate there. Almost 9 significant strikes landed per minute. Uses his length, definitely uses his length. And he showed pretty decent takedown defense. If you watch his Dana White Contender Series fight, showed some pretty decent takedown defense in that one. It's always interesting to watch a fight, though, where the fighter loses. And I want to go back here to Ignacio Bahamondes' fight. Let me just pull this up here. So that fight was against Salvador Becerra. That was in Combate. And that fight was interesting to me because Becerra, he put the pressure on him. He cut the ring off. He was always coming forward. He was staying in the pocket. He wasn't allowing Bahamondes to use his length, right? It was a close fight, but I do think Salvador did win that, again, by implementing all of those different factors. And before I kind of state my pick on this, just to talk about John Makdessi a little bit, more of a counter striker style of fighter. Kickboxer is sort of his discipline, his nature, way more on the technique side of things rather than that sort of brawl and exchange side of things. And to some degree, he's somewhat of a slow starter. Takes his time to really get into the rhythm of the fight. And that breakdown alone of Makdessi is the reason why I'm going with Bahamondes. If this is going to be technical, I think Ignacio is going to be able to use that length. I think he's going to be able to use that reach. I do think that this fight is going to remain a kickboxing match for the most part. I don't really see Makdessi being able to sort of bull rush Bahamondes to really take away from that length, height, and give him problems in that way. I see Bahamondes being the bigger fighter, right? Again, competing at 170 in his last couple of fights versus a true 155 in Makdessi. And Makdessi doesn't really look that big in the division from what I've noticed. Again, I mean, I'm picking Bahamondes on this. I think Makdessi has good stand-up stylistically, but or I should say good stand-up in general. But stylistically, I just don't like this matchup for him. Again, I'm going to mention it, the height and the reach advantage. I think that's going to give Makdessi problems, and I don't think Makdessi is going to be able to strategize to stop that. So I'm going with Ignacio Bahamondes on this one, minus 190. I know he's maybe not as proven, but I like the value here at minus 190.
Yeah, I'm with you actually on this pick here. I'm going with the newcomer, even though he doesn't have he hasn't fought in the best guys. He hasn't given us an indication of where he's at in his game. But he has shown us a bit in the fights that are available. Now, the reason I'm taking him is actually, I think the size is going to be the reason, because if you really look at Makdessi's work, he has a lot of good work he's done in the UFC. He's one of the better pure strikers in the UFC, and he arguably is going to be the better striker in this fight, arguably. But the height is huge, and when you look at who he's lost to Lando Benata. Trinaldo I believe that was a pretty close fight, but he lost that fight as well. He lost to Benata as well, but he lost to Yancy Medeiros in a split decision. Yeah, Yancey's not the best striker, but Yancey's tall. He lost to Donald Cerrone, another pretty tall striker. He lost to Alan Patrick, but he utilized wrestling in that fight. But he lost to another striker, Anthony Nikuwani, another tall guy. So in these fights against these taller fighters that have decent striking, but Anthony Nikuwani is actually a kickboxer, but the other guys just have decent striking, MMA striking level. And Makdessi's not able to win those fights. And I actually think Ignacio has a higher ceiling in terms of striking than a lot of those guys I mentioned. He's ruthless. He has the leg kicks. He has timing down. I think this is a fight he can win. I think the guys that are going to give this guy Ignacio a problem are going to be grapplers, guys that go in with the approach to get him off his feet. I just think Ignacio's he's pretty much at that point where he's getting there. Like he's pretty much figuring out the game. And I think that the reach, the size, is going to be too much, the leg kick. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Ignacio as well. I think the size is going to be too much. I don't think Makdessi likes when his opponents have such a reach advantage.
Definitely. Definitely. So we're still going. We got 3 more fights on the prelims. Let's move on to fight number 7. In that case, we have Norma Dumont versus Erin Blanchfield. I will keep this one short. I'm going with Norma Dumont on this. I see way too many advantages for her. Size, especially. I know we were just talking about Bahamondes. We're looking at Norma Dumont, somebody who competes at 135 and someone who even missed weight in that fight at 139, taking on a very small 125er, right? So, and on top of that, this fight is happening at bantamweight. This fight is happening at 135. So it's interesting to see Erin Blanchfield make her debut under these circumstances. When I look at Dumont, I mean, good win in her last fight versus Ashley Evans-Smith. That was the fight she came in overweight at by 4 pounds. Grappling specialist, ground specialist. She uses the leg kicks. I like her stand-up. I don't love it, of course, but it is more than respectable, I should say. She has some pop on her punches as well, right? I mean, decent in and out movement on the feet, decent switch stance as well. She's going to give you different looks, and she's pretty patient on the feet. So for somebody, and on top of that, I do like her counter punching ability as well and her timing. So for somebody who is more of a grappling specialist to offer, whether you think it's amazing or not, to offer that much discipline in the stand-up, there are some factors there that I like about her. For Erin Blanchfield, I mean, she's 6-1. Most of her action has come from Invicta. She has a majority win decision over Kay Hansen. She has a split decision loss to Tracy Cortez. Some people feel like she lost that fight. Obviously, those are 2 women that are in the UFC. So it gives you an idea as to, where Erin Blanchfield is from a level of competition perspective. But that said, her stand-up is very basic. Throws a lot of 1-2s, very green stand-up. She's super young as well. I think she's 21, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just pull up that fight here on Tapology. Yeah, she's 21 years old. So again, very young, still has a lot to learn. She's one of those fighters that are going to look for wrestling opportunities, and she is a good wrestler, right? But that said, watch her fight versus Tracy Cortez. Cortez was able to stuff her. Cortez was able to wrestle her back in her own right. Again, I'll get to the conclusion. I said Norma Dumont. I really just can't find a path of victory here for Erin Blanchfield. She's small. She's a 125er. She's fighting at 135 versus a much bigger Norma Dumont. I think, Dumont's going to be able to do what she wants due to simply the size and the strength advantage.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Keep in mind though, Erin Blanchfield, she's won I believe she's won a couple jiu-jitsu tournaments. I know that there was a lot of talk about her in the past. She would have been in the UFC already, but she lost that fight to Tracy Cortez by split decision. She has a win over Kay Hansen. So she has a good win on a fighter that's in the UFC right now. In my opinion, Blanchfield might be the more skilled fighter in this fight. In my opinion, I think she has a high level jiu-jitsu. I believe she has a higher level jiu-jitsu than Norma Dumont. Now, the reason I'm picking Norma Dumont though is because, just like you said, Blanchfield fights at 125. Norma Dumont fought Megan Anderson at 145. And then she fought Ashley Evans-Smith at 135. Again, she came in weight. She was overweight. So I think what it's going to come down to is Norma Dumont's going to be the stronger girl in there. Even if Blanchfield has the technique to pull off certain grappling maneuvers, I think Norma Dumont has a bit of the know-how, and I think the strength is going to bail her out every single time. And I think on the feet, I think Blanchfield on the feet can surprise. I think with her age, she's going to improve because she's been improving a lot every fight. But I just think that Norma's going to have the power. She's going to be able to mix it up better. And I think the size is going to be the thing here. And again, Erin's coming. I think this is a short notice fight, which is why it's at this weight class, right? So we know Norma's been preparing. So I'm going to go, Norma's been preparing for Bay Malecki. So I'm going to go Norma Dumont. I should get it done. I feel pretty confident in this fight. But I think that Erin Blanchfield is a sneaky underdog pick, but I'm not going to roll that dice. So I'm going to go Norma Dumont.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree definitely with the Erin Blanchfield comments as well. I think she is more of a fighter to look out for in her next UFC fight because I do think she will start her UFC career with a loss to Norma Dumont. In that case, let's move on to fight number 8. Why don't you tell me how you feel about this one? We have Scott Holtzman versus Mateusz Gamrot.
All right, we got Scott Holtzman. He's well-rounded, legit. He can wrestle. He's a pretty decent striker. Not the best striker, but he can hold his own, right? So against guys that can't strike, that can wrestle, he keeps it on the feet and he outstrikes them. Against guys that can strike better, that can't wrestle, what he does is he takes them down, utilizes his wrestling. So he has a pretty good approach. He has a well-rounded game in the UFC. He's been pretty successful. He's been doing okay. He had a bad loss last fight, a really bad knockout versus Beneil Dariush. But prior to that, he was on a 2-fight winning streak. So he's a solid opponent. He's a solid opponent. Beating him will tell you where you're at in the UFC. He's a good stepping stone. He's a good gatekeeper to kind of indicate, is this guy's UFC level? And I really love Gamrot in this spot. I think Gamrot's gonna run through this guy. I think Gamrot has the much better wrestling, and the striking. He might have the better striking. I don't know. He might have the better striking, but I think that Gamrot's gonna put on a pace here. Remember, Gamrot was undefeated until he fought Guram Kutaladze. What's that guy's name again? Kanzat. What's his name? Chimaev.
Yeah, Chimaev's boy, and then he put on a pace on him.
Yeah. So in my opinion, I'm not even gonna lie. I think that Gamrot squeaked out a win there, but I understand how they picked Guram to win the fight. I understand how some judges may judge a fight, but in this fight, Gamrot suffered his first loss. I think that's gonna be a good thing. I think he's gonna push it. I think he's gonna go up the ranks. I think taking that loss is actually a good thing here. I see him coming out here winning this fight, and I actually see this guy marching up the rankings in the lightweight division. So I like Gamrot on this spot. He's good everywhere. Really good wrestling, smart fighter. Yeah, you should get this done. Yeah, I'm pretty confident on this pick.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this then in that case because again, I'm going to echo pretty much everything that you're saying. We're looking at two fighters who are really well-rounded. We're looking at Mateusz Gamrot, who lost a close fight in his last fight, breaking that 17-0 undefeated streak. You got to imagine that he comes out stronger than that, right? I'm not going to compare him to Canelo Alvarez, but after Alvarez lost to Floyd, he became a different man. So, Gamrot has that potential to sort of wake up and show me more, because even though for as good as he is, I wouldn't say he's shown me a lot. But to your point, Scott Holtzman is going to be the perfect litmus test to show that he belongs in the UFC, to show that he belongs in this division as a potential contender in the future. And again, I think he's at the very least, if not the better striker, he's at least the more technical striker. I think he has the better takedown ability or the better ground game. We know he's a Polish and a European grappling champion as well. So again, his accolades speak for itself. His disciplines speak for itself. Two well-rounded guys in here, but I'm going to go with the guy who's just slightly better everywhere, in my opinion, and that person is Mateusz Gamrot. In that case, let's move on to our final fight of our prelims. We have Jim Miller versus Joe Solecki. Why don't you tell me how you feel about this?
I'm going Joe Solecki because, in my opinion, Jim Miller is a live dog in this fight, but Jim Miller usually, lately, he's been winning fights with his grappling. Lately, he's been utilizing his grappling to win fights. And against Vince Pichel, who's normally known as a striker, was able to out-grapple Jim Miller in that fight. So I think in this fight, I think Jim Miller, the age is going to catch up. He's 37. He's fighting a young, good grappler, good wrestler that has really good submissions. Can get the back, can control the back for the whole round, can submit you from anywhere. I think Solecki's the better grappler today at this point. And I think that he's going to be the stronger guy in the ring because he's 12 years younger. He's 27. Yeah, I like Solecki here. I don't see how Jim Miller wins this fight unless he outstrikes him and does a boxing approach or hurts him on the feet. Because I think that Jim Miller, every fight he's in, eventually turns into a grappling match. And this is the wrong guy to play that game with. And I think Joe Solecki is going to show that right now he's the better grappler, and he should win a comfortable decision.
Agreed. Joe Solecki, he's 10 years younger. To your point with the grappling, he has 10 wins. 7 of them are via choke. So 5 rear naked chokes, 1 triangle choke, 1 guillotine. I don't think Jim Miller is better anywhere in this fight. Jim Miller is really only a dog because he's Jim Miller. And a Jim Miller fight never goes maybe as easy as you think it might go. But I mean, Joe Solecki, I feel he's just better everywhere. I feel pretty comfortable in picking Joe Solecki here. And I'm almost surprised at the minus 230 on this one. I thought it may have been, minus 250, minus 260. So potentially some decent value here with Joe Solecki. He is going to be my pick as well. In that case, let's take it to Vegas. Let's provide them with our picks. Why don't we go with, let's start underdog. Which underdog do you feel maybe has the best shot here?
I'm going with, again, Luis Saldaña. I like that fighter. I actually hope he wins the fight.
I'm not putting his favorite. Oh, yeah, my bad. I forgot you're going Griffin.
I'm not putting a bet down on Luis Saldaña. I'm not going to put a bet down on this fight. I love his style, and him winning benefits the UFC with that exciting style versus Jordan Griffin's boring style. But I think Jordan Griffin to me, is the best underdog value, as well as Hunter Azure. I'm not putting bets on either of them, but I think those two have the best value as far as underdogs on the prelims. And William Knight. And William Knight. So I'm giving you 3 underdog picks. I'm not putting money on, but those are 3 picks that I'm not betting those fights, period. But I feel those 3 fights can go anyway.
Yeah, I want to echo those picks. I mean, I don't really have sort of a different underdog shot here. So I'll definitely echo the same picks. I'll maybe take Jordan Griffin off of my underdog picks because I do feel good about Saldaña getting it done. But again, Griffin, very legitimate threat there. William Knight, of course, we know to some degree puncher's chance, but also to another degree, he has that ability to take it to the ground. So I can see that happening as well. If I were to pick maybe one underdog that has the best shot of winning, I would stick with Hunter Azure. Again, I mean, he looked a lot better in his last fight. More IQ, more playing to a style rather than just presenting a stand-up, for example. So, Hunter Azure has a shot there in my eyes. That would be my maybe official underdog pick if I were to have one that might be able to best have the opportunity to win. Let's move on to maybe a couple of favorite picks in that case.
All right, my favorite pick actually, this is my favorite pick on the entire card. I like Mateusz Gamrot to get that done. I'm really high on that guy.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick, definitely. I'm going to go with, in terms of a favorite pick, I feel pretty good about Norma Dumont at minus 250. Let me see if I can add anything to that really quickly here. I feel pretty good about Joe Solecki as well. And you know what? I'm gonna stick with those 2 as kind of 2 of my favorite picks on the prelim here. I wouldn't even mind parlaying them together at even money plus 102. So definitely some decent value on this undercard. I mean, again, 9 fights on the undercard, so a very full undercard to say the least. But you know what? Let's stop it there for now. Let's stop it there for now. Of course, we know our main card predictions are coming up next. Definitely check that out, because on there you will get our entire card picks, and you definitely want to pay attention to that. In the meantime, do all that algorithmic stuff. You know what it is already, man. Subscribe, like, rate, comment, hit the notification bell, share with anyone that you know that needs additional UFC analysis, additional UFC breakdown. We try to make it as clear cut as possible. We would appreciate, again, subscribing, doing all of that algorithmic stuff. And in the meantime, we're just going to continue to give you our breakdown and our analysis and try to make this money together. UFC Vegas, aka, well, UFC Vegas 23, aka UFC on ABC 2, aka UFC Fight Night, Kevin Holland versus Marvin Vettori. This has been your prelim reviews provided by Boxingmmapicks. He goes by Zan, I go by Harris. Let's make this money.
Let's do it.